all, all good wishes to everybody. So we have sort of half an hour, just because my time is limited. I was speaking about my ability to interact on an individual level with devotees, especially since so much of my time is taken up, or I'm trying to take up with the writing books. It's hard work. It doesn't come easily. So you have to keep that into consideration for devotees who are really thinking about entering into this relationship. And more about it, I'll talk in the future. I have certain ideas, but for the time being, that's as much as I say. I'd like to just take this opportunity. Curtains are closing. Jai Dayanita Vijay Guranga Ki Jai. And let me take this opportunity to speak a little about just sort of basic principles of what we call Guru Tattva. So this word tattva comes in many times in Krishna consciousness. It's there in Vedic literature. I don't know that there's a exact translation to the word tattva. Sometimes we say the word truth that's in one word, or philosophical foundation, or a philosophical principle. But generally the truths is what we say Guru Tattva, the truths about Guru. And Tattva means those are the basic principles that Krishna has established by which everything works. Now it may be spiritual life, material life. We're more interested in spiritual development. So there's Guru Tattva, there's Bhagavad Tattva, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Tattva. What is the Tattva of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? And so many things which, these are eternal truths. They don't change. And there are principles that one must know how to properly apply. So at least knowing these things is really the duty of a disciple. How good is a teacher in a school? Well, as good as his students. So when, sometimes, I don't know if you've had that the principal walks into the classroom. You have that? So principal walks in the classroom and he starts asking questions. And he wants to know how the students are, just off the cuff, he starts asking questions about whatever it is, whether it's mathematics or geography or history. And he wants to know what kind of answers you're going to give. Why? Well, one is to show that he's also interested in the students, but the other is that he's interested in the teacher. The teacher is only as good as she or he, mostly it's she. I don't know what percentage are teachers, but university was a different thing. But below university, mostly, especially elementary school, mostly ladies. So how good does she communicate to children those things, those truths that she's meant to speak? So yes, devotees should know these principles, especially those who preach, but ultimately for our own, to ensure our own deliverance and make sure that we really know what it is that we're doing in Krishna consciousness. then it's important to understand the basic truths. Now, Bhagavad Gita is full of these basic truths. However, very often it's in a sutra form. Srila Prabhupada expands and elaborates on that, on those sutras. But there's even more than what is in Prabhupada's purports, and therefore Srila Prabhupada further elaborates in Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, so that when you want to know a topic, then you look it up in all of Prabhupada's books. Now, who has folio on their computers? Who knows what folio is? We got a few. Well, the men is almost everybody. Ladies, not so much. Very good. And Zoom, well, I can't. Okay, put your hand up and keep it up if you've got folio. Okay, I'm going to do good business here for folio. You should all get folio, because it's one of those things. Okay, you can put your hands down now. Thank you. It's one of those things in modern technology that's fantastic. I mean, you don't hear me say that often, but this is wonderful. You want to know something about Guru Tattva, you put it in, press the button, and you'll get a list of so many things throughout Srila Prabhupada's books. Now, there's also other folio, which has not just Srila Prabhupada's books, but the books of the Acharyas. And then you get information from Goswamis and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's fantastic. You should not hesitate to get that. If you have a reason to have a computer and study things online, this is something that's really, really worth studying. And when it comes to knowing, just like you read something in the Bhagavatam and you come across something that you don't understand, you put in the right combination of words and out comes so many explanations. I mean, I use it for writing every third minute. I'm on folio. So that's something that devotees, this is really yukta vairagya. This is really engaging things in the service of the Lord. And it's a wonderful tool. So I'm just going to use that right now. So this tattva of Guru, I'm referring to one book, which I've seen as the best shloka book, and it's not by ISKCON devotees, although they've done so many shloka books. The shlokas are all the same. It's just a question of how they're actually listed and under what subheadings they are. So this is Guru Tattva, and it's under basic subheadings, which then have corresponding shlokas. And of course, you've heard me say that before, that devotees who want to follow Srila Prabhupada's footprints and instructions, they will memorize verses. Okay. Who is that? Tanchich Soli is over there with, oh. So, here I'm quoting one principle is that one must accept the Guru in disciplic succession. Many verses. Tad bhigyanam sagurumi babhikachet samatpani shrotriya brahmanishtam. Now, this is a quote that comes from Upanishads. which indicates that this is not a new thing. This is a eternal principle that other verses may say. There's so many verses here, and I don't know whether all of them, but that one's human form of life is not complete and will not be perfected unless one actually accepts a bona fide spiritual master and accepts initiation from him. Oh, in the previous video, and maybe you can just put up your hands, who's seen those two videos? One I did on relationship with gurus and Srila Prabhupada, and the other one on what's it? Yes, hiding your guru. Can you put up your hands? Who's seen those? I know you all seen them because you were all here. We're looking to see who's seen them there, and not necessarily everybody. So, oh, we've got good hands. That's good. So please look at those because that's those are things that I've worked on, planned, made specific notes on, and spoken at length. Yeah, we usually go on for about 3 hours on that. So please look those up. That's civilization. To not have a spiritual master, or to have a spiritual master who's accepted for out of social convention, material gain, superstition, that's not accepting a guru. And then obviously accepting gurus who fulfill those specific functions, they're also not gurus. They're just ordinary people. And of course, those ordinary people connect with their followers, and they drag each other down, or as far as their karma takes them. So, but one has to accept a spiritual master, and the principle of guru is mentioned throughout Shastra evenly. Shastra talks about different types of spiritual masters. In other words, disciples who, spiritual masters who are in different grades of Krishna consciousness or realization. Now, I don't have that in front of me, and I don't even know if it's here. I don't think so. This from Jiva Goswami talks about the three different levels of spiritual masters. And I don't see something here that would indicate that that's here. But there are different levels of Vaishnavas, and since a guru is a Vaishnava, therefore there are different, when you see in Shastra talk about Vaishnavas of different standard, then any of those Vaishnavas who act in the category of spiritual master also fall into those different standards. And it is actually the responsibility of a disciple to actually recognize what are the symptoms of a Vaishnava. That's why you find it throughout Shastra. This is what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu starts off with. This is what Chaitanya Charitamrita starts with. You find this everywhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, in 11th canto. So Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttam. So all these Vaishnavas are being described, and they're being described by their lakshana. Yatraya lakshanam proktam. Everything should be determined by its lakshana. So Prabhupada gives this example. You want to buy gold? you better know what gold is before you go buying it. And when you know, you got to know the difference between 24 karat, 22 karat, 18 karat, 14 karat, 10 karat, and then just carats. They're not all the same. You have to know the lakshana. And of course, one of the lakshana is that you have a black stone on which you've got scratched all of the different colors of these types of gold. And when you're going to buy, you take one and you see which one it corresponds to. And on the basis of that, you know, now this many carat gold. So similarly, devotees need to actually understand what it is that they're getting involved in and what the qualification of a Vaishnava is, at least based on a certain amount of spiritual education and their realization. Obviously, this takes place when devotees are quite young. So that means that they're the least educated in this. Shastra states, Sanatana Goswami states, that at least 1 year should be there to test each other. Why? To actually see, does this person match up to at least the qualifications that I've seen? And does he not have extraordinary behavior that's not befitting a person who is meant to be representing God? So someone who's representing God has to be very qualified. Now, let me use the example of a ambassador in a country. Now, you may have someone who's very, very expert. Often these ambassadors do a lot of economic exchange, facilitate the exchange between countries, or they do cultural, excuse me. They do cultural exchange and so many other types of interaction. Some are better, some are worse, some are really tried and tested. They've done work in Bosnia, in Kenya, and in Ukraine, in sensitive places. And some people have just sort of stepped out of university and gone through some minimal training with the government. But however qualified or however expert they may be, they represent the country. And the approach of the external affairs and other members of the host country in which they're situated is as if I am dealing with that country, irregardless of what that person is. Similarly, the country of origin will consider that their relationship is based on the relationship with the ambassador. So similarly, you may have different gurus of different expertise, gurus of different level of Krishna consciousness, gurus of different level of importance. In the line of parampara, in the line of disciplic succession, for instance, we see in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, there's this list of 33 gurus. Now, there are many other spiritual masters because that line that you see is the line of Shiksha rather than the line of Diksha, which means that you don't necessarily see the Diksha gurus, even of those people who are also listed there. Why? Because they don't play that important part in the disciplic succession. It doesn't mean that they're not pure devotees, that they haven't facilitated their dependents to return back home, back to Godhead. But they're not on par with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Jiva Goswami and so on. But Guru means Guru. And wherever you read in Srila Prabhupada's books, I've had this discussion with a senior devotee who proposed that in Prabhupada's book, when he talks about Guru, he's talking about himself, which is a very surprising argument. But just like Shastra, Prabhupada doesn't personalize that principle of Guru, that he's just talking about himself, unless he actually makes that very clear in context, but rather it's a principle, the principle of spiritual master. And this was one of the things that I was speaking about back when this idea comes up that Srila Prabhupada is the one who takes everybody back to Godhead, and that ultimately every devotee in ISKCON, their main connection is with Srila Prabhupada. This is not anywhere in Shastra. This is not what Shastra says. Shastra says that we have a upadiksham tite jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha, that you have your link with that. Tadvidhi paripratena pariprashnena seva. You have a link with that person with whom you take initiation from, and / or the person who later on, perhaps in addition to your Diksha Guru, plays a very important part in your advancement in spiritual life. Then you're the Shiksha Guru. And here Shiksha Guru, I think I discussed this the last time, acts in the capacity of that person who helps you realize your eternal spiritual identity. So, for instance, in the case where devotees are taking initiation, just like we have so many devotees we were young, we took initiation from Srila Prabhupada, but it's been decades since Srila Prabhupada left us. So Srila Prabhupada's followers and his disciples are often in search of senior Sangha, someone who's much older than them. Now Srila Prabhupada points out that that can be a god brother or a god sister who's giving that type of instruction. And Bhagavatam Prabhupada says that sometimes a devotee accepts one's own god brother almost in the same stature as one's own spiritual master, because we're meant to more or less get that shiksha within ISKCON. Prabhupada didn't really want us to take the risk of going outside ISKCON, so we have to look for that within. And that was a discussion that I had just recently with a devotee. Is everything you need to go back to Godhead within ISKCON? Devotees think, I got inspired by such and such guru or Babaji outside of ISKCON, but is he actually teaching anything else? In other words, there's nothing new in terms of the philosophy. There's nothing new in terms of the mood or deliverance. Maybe someone has a different delivery and knows certain more details, but is someone actually very sure that they need to leave the confines of what Srila Prabhupada gave us, that there's no devotee who can act in that position of guru within the world. And that's something that the internet again facilitates, is that we have the opportunity to hear from so many Vaishnavas. Anyhow, we were talking about the importance of accepting a spiritual master and that ultimately, my point here being that unless it's qualified, in other words, unless the advancement of the spiritual master is qualified, whatever you read about guru applies to your guru and applies to any guru. It's not that they apply only to Srila Prabhupada. So when we say that you have to accept the guru in disciplic succession, and yes, you have to accept the living guru. This rhythmic concept of accepting somebody who's already passed away it's more than absurd. And of course, you don't find any reference to it anywhere in Shastra or Vaishnava tradition. Anyway, that we've gone over. However, as it's stated here, Ravanyapi bahuvir yonal habya Srinvantopi bahavona vidhu Charyosya. A lot of noise goes on back there. Remélem, hogy nem törtük össze a dolgokat. Ascharyosa vakta kuslosya labdha Ascharyo gyata kushalanu shishta. I thought it was a little difficult Sanskrit, but that's just from the Upanishads. So here this verse points out that a qualified guru is very difficult to find, and a qualified disciple is very difficult to find. So what are the qualifications of a guru? But what are the qualifications of a disciple? So sometimes the word is, well, when should I take initiation? But what are the qualifications? Don't you know whether you're qualified? And everyone's gone through education. The whole point of education is that you're becoming qualified. You step into some employment and they ask you, what's your qualification? And then you say, I've done this, and that becomes, so you're qualified. A disciple is also qualified. So, what's that qualification? Srila Prabhupada would like to quote in 241 in Bhagavad Gita, where you have that. Can you take that out? What Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually says? How a devotee accepts the instructions of the spiritual masters with life and soul. Sounds great. Doing it is another story. But that's what we need to be doing. And that becomes the overall criteria of a disciple, that I'm willing to do whatever a spiritual master says. So what is it that a guru knows? What is the guru tattva in relationship to Krishna? Is that a guru knows the tattva of Krishna. And let's see. Here's a nice verse in Hari Bhakti Vilas, just because of the time. And I just realized I'm going over time and I'm supposed to have my physiotherapy in a few minutes, but maybe we'll push it off a little. One who is an ocean of mercy, this here is a guru, who is fulfilled in all respects, who has all good qualities, who works for the benefit of all souls, who is free from lust, who is perfect in all respects, who is well versed in the scriptures, who knows the science of Krishna, who can remove all the doubts of his disciples, and who is always alert in the service of Krishna, is known as a genuine guru. So here's your shopping list. You can just check on the basis of this. Kripa Sindhu, Su Sampurna, Sarva Sattva Pakaraka, and so on. So very beautiful, just gives a list. And when we talk about qualification of guru, and there are so many subdivisions in all of this. Here is a very beautiful verse. There were many principles. If you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, it starts off with just this, these spiritual masters. That's the first thing to know. And let me just read some of these headings. We know this, by the mercy of Krishna, one gets the mercy of Guru. So Guru, Krishna, Prasadapai, Bhakti Lata Bij. And what does the Guru give? He gives scientific knowledge about the highest spiritual reality. So that's really the business of spiritual master. We had this, where did we have this conversation? In UK. Oh yes, with some godbrothers who they were citing that one of the common misconceptions of what's a good class. So a good class is the more jokes that you can crack and the more that you can entertain devotees, they will go out saying, that was a great class. But a spiritual master is not a comedian. Someone who's giving class is not meant to be entertaining. He's meant to be illuminating. And devotees need to be open to be illuminated and not expect to be entertained. So he gives knowledge of the highest spiritual reality. So Krishna is the highest spiritual reality. Just like we just, yesterday, you all observed Balaram Jayanti. I say you because my observance of Balaram Jayanti was really quite minimal. We had lunch at midday, which some devotees consider to be demoniac, to eat at midday, that one should wait until moonrise. And Govinda Maharaj just reminded me of that when we asked some Gaudiya Vaishnava about when to break fast for, but it was actually for Ramachandra's appearance day. So yes, this higher reality, and one is meant to at least understand, get a grasp of who it is that we are talking about when we're talking about Krishna. And because Krishna is everything, well, then we're really stuck. Am I supposed to know everything? Srila Prabhupada said, you should know at least as much as your spiritual master tells you. That means knowing everything that you've been taught. How much should you know? When you've gone to school, you should know as much as your teacher has taught you. Otherwise, not there just to talk. And interestingly, I don't know where this is. Oh, Mana Shiksha. So Nadarmam Nadarmam Shuti Kanam Nirukta Kila Guru. Described here that the spiritual master is considered to be the energy of Krishna. Many of these tattvas are really inconceivable. Now, this, for instance, I don't know, I see Bhaktipad Goswami over there. And sometime in the future, he will act as guru, but please don't everybody start rushing to him now, because it's not the ideal thing to do. Let's wait until the process is accepted by the leadership of the society. Krishna Shakti Vinena Hatava Pravartana. Krishna Shakti, Krishna's potency, enters into that devotee. So Baladev is original guru. He's the original spiritual master. Krishna is the original spiritual master, but Krishna does talk about himself, Mata Parataram Nanyat, and other similar verses like that. But those, in terms of those who speak about Krishna, so the first person who speaks about Krishna is Lord Balaram. And I don't know where I was just recently speaking. If you study Lord Balaram's Leela, then all of his Leela that's described, or most of his Leela or pastime that's described in Srimad Bhagavatam, are teachings of how the are instructions of the Guru or the original spiritual master. And of course, Srimati Radharani is the other spiritual master. However, because ladies, first of all, it's very rare that they act in that position. And second, if they maintain their position in Varnashram, then they take a more behind the scenes role. So just like Srimati Radharani told Gopkumar, you go bring this Mathura Brahmana and bring him back to me. So she doesn't actively play a role, a visible role here in earth. It's just she's given in part of her Leela some instruction. But of course, she is as much Guru because she also speaks in the second person about Krishna. So similarly, there's this empowerment that comes down. And now empowerment isn't something that all of a sudden, you get this energy is shining and electricity sparks are going off. But it's a very important principle to understand that when a Vaishnava is already an empowered person, and specifically when a Vaishnava takes that position, is authorized by who? Is authorized by his Guru. ISKCON as an institution may have to actually certify that this person is a quality or qualified as a Vaishnava who can give spiritual guidance. But the reason for that is that as an institution, we have to at least be able to say, yes, we took and we did certain investigation and we took certain steps to ensure that those who are members of this institution actually, I don't know whoever is there, turn off your microphone, that they are qualified in this particular role. Otherwise, if the institution didn't do that, then when we see that there are spiritual masters who don't act accordingly or don't keep the vows or do something, then everyone comes back, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let this person in that position? There's no guarantee, but at least that there's been a basic investigation into the qualification of that spiritual master. But once again, it isn't necessarily the institution that empowers. Primarily, it's the Guru. Tasmad Guru Prapadyeta Jignasukshneya Uttama. So when one's Guru says, you take the role, and you can read about this, Srila Prabhupada says this often, you take the role, you become Guru, then they become empowered. And that empowerment ultimately is coming down, and you may not see it, you may not feel it, but if you don't respect it on the basis of what Shastra says, then you run the risk of seeing the spiritual master as an ordinary person. Let me just sort of respond. Continue about that. Yes. So Srila Prabhupada would quote this verse from Padma Purana, out of which here we have also just one line, or actually one phrase. Guru Shunarpatiryasya va narakisa. But a person who thinks Gurushu, if you think that Guru is Nara, is an ordinary man, then va narakisa. That is considered to be a hellish mentality, or in this translation, one who thinks that the spiritual master is an ordinary man is said to live in hell. Prabhupada on different occasions says it's a risky business to be close to the spiritual master. Close to the spiritual master or close to the deity. You do deity worship, you have to have good consciousness, otherwise you start thinking this is actually just a marble statue. To think that here is Krishna is standing personally, they are here. Just as much as Krishna was personally here 5,000 years ago, or Gaurnitai was here 500 years ago, now Gaurnitai are here on the altar. No difference. 1231 would like to take control of your camera. I don't know, what am I supposed to do, Chaitanya Chandra?
Nothing, don't click anything. I don't know what that is.
Okay. And Srila Prabhupada would emphasize this. He says, who thinks the Guru, an ordinary man, finds his attempt at spiritual progress as useless as an elephant's bath. So how can someone who's supposed to think that here is the representative of God, that's a pretty high position, that if this person is just ordinary and I can interpret his instructions and deal with him like an ordinary man, because he looks like an ordinary person. But then Krishna looked like an ordinary person, very beautiful person, but still that didn't sell the goods for most of the people who saw him. So despite the fact that Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, did so many extraordinary things, looked the way he did all the inconceivable things, still people thought, for the most part, well, maybe he's a demigod. But they couldn't accept it. Now here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So perhaps at some other time, this is something to emphasize. My emphasis at present was that Guru, the reference to Guru means every Guru. Whether later on they turn out to be super exceptional, or they turn out that somehow or another they betrayed their position, while someone is acting in that position, one has to give them the benefit of the doubt. Unless you start to see that he no longer fulfills the qualification, and that's a whole different role. What do we do when the Guru actually doesn't act according to the standards of a spiritual master? How should we treat that? So, but the reference in Shastra to spiritual master is the same. It applies to everybody, and we need to think of it that way. And when it talks about Guru, that means both Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. And we should be very clear of that in our minds. And I think that this is one benefit that the devotees are going to have in the future, that those devotees, for instance, who are initiated, and if the spiritual master leaves this world, that there will be many senior devotees from whom they can get instruction, and particularly they may find one devotee who can actually really guide them in discovering or uncovering their eternal spiritual identity. So Guru is one, and don't buy any kind of argument that you should actually either hide your Guru. That certainly wasn't Srila Prabhupada's approach. Prabhupada said, no, Rolls Royce isn't good enough. he should be driving in a golden car. God drives in a golden car. So we should also, and it's a fact, when Akrura came to Vrindavan, Kamsa gave him his car to come in, and that car was a golden car. Must have been really strong horses to pull a golden car. So God drives in a golden car. So yes, God's representative should also drive in a golden car. It's not a matter of hiding. And as much as we give respect to Srila Prabhupada as the founder Acharya, whose books are the law books for the future, whose vision sets the direction of the mission of the Krishna consciousness movement, but Srila Prabhupada only talked of one type of guru, himself. And it's the same guru that's being mentioned in Shastra. So we need to be able to offer that kind of respect up until that time that we see that someone has become disempowered. He no longer follows that standard, in which case he will become disempowered. You can be empowered and you can be disempowered. So Parashuram was an empowered incarnation of Krishna. But when he met Lord Ramachandra and he wanted to challenge Lord Ramachandra as a Kshatriya, he became disempowered. He lost his power. The same power that was given to him, Lord Ramachandra withdrew. So one can be empowered and one can be disempowered. And similarly, a disciple becomes empowered. When a disciple prays to Krishna, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, when a disciple wants to actually act in a very qualified and emphatic way in the role of a disciple, actually acting as the follower and servant of the spiritual master, Krishna empowers the disciple also. So just as gurus become empowered, disciples become empowered. Why? Because guru is Vaishnava and disciple is also a Vaishnava. And a Vaishnava is a representative of Krishna. And to the greater or lesser degree that we want to be the dasa and das, the servant of the guru, to that degree, Krishna actually empowers. So yes, be an empowered disciple, because empowered disciples are very effective. So to the degree that there was one devotee, a lady disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And she was actually a nurse. She had cancer and she was really suffering, and she was leaving her body. It took quite a long time, but her meditation was constantly on her spiritual master. Even when the topic came up, or the issue came up about meditating on Krishna and Krishna's pastime, she would just say, I can only fix my mind in one direction, and I just think about my spiritual master, and I meditate and serve him, and I'm sure that everything else that I would need to do or achieve, that will naturally come from that. And then she passed away like that. When she passed away, she was like, she had her head in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's lap. So yes, that kind of fidelity that Prabhupada says, order of the spiritual master's life and soul, sounds great, but actually doing that this is my life, and one is intelligent enough to know how to do that. So, you've heard many talks by Prabhupada's disciples, especially. We had this 50th anniversary of the installation of Radha Gokulanda, which I was at in London. It was very beautiful, well organized program. And there, of course, Prabhupada disciples talked about how, in our day, we just, gave everything. And then you hear devotees say, well, things have changed since then. And the question comes up, what's changed? You mean now devotees don't have their spiritual master as the life and soul? And if that's the case, then that has become a major problem. And where has that discussion, teachings, or influence come that the spiritual master is less than the life and soul of the disciple, that he's an empowered person, Prabhupada uses the word a superhuman man, and that the disciple is meant to have this type of relationship. Why? What's the difference? Well, there should be no difference. And if there is, then it's something that's insidious that undermines ultimately the purpose of Krishna consciousness, and it robs devotees of their natural right to have a very open, public relationship with their spiritual master that obviously does not undermine the relationship that everyone has with Srila Prabhupada, and does not undermine who Srila Prabhupada is. So it's a devotee's right, and devotees should not be bereft of that right. And they will be empowered specifically by their faith and their devotion to Guru. Okay, I'm going to stop. Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, and it's been a lovely discussion. Well, it was a one-way discussion. It was just me, but I hope that we sort of touched on this one subject matter, and devotees really should be alert, either if they hear information to the contrary of what we were just talking about, or if within themselves they actually have that type of doubt or misapprehension. It's a concerning thing, and it's not a desirable thing. So Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu is very diligent. He always, on a regular basis, reminds me, okay, we're coming to the time of having another meeting. I really appreciate that so many devotees are there. I mean, we've got 5 times 5 is 25, times 8 is how much? Huh? Yeah, 200. I mean, that's
191.
191.
We added all.
Oh, okay. And then well, that didn't work for the math I was talking about. And then there's so many 2 devotees, or sometimes more, in each frame. So it's great. You're front and center over here, Gauravani, so I'm just seeing you straight on. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the future. We'll be going to Mayapur at the end of this month, and I'll be there until beginning of April. Perhaps when I come through Dubai, because I fly through Dubai, we may spend a few days there, and then we'll be coming back here and here in Hungary until the next time we go, which is who knows when. So yeah, if you can come and visit, please come and visit us here and now. The opportunity won't always be there in the future. Ishwan, who's that that's with you, that's beside you? Ishwan Vaishnav, who's that beside you? Because I'm looking for, oh, that's Ferry. Oh, yeah, that's Ferry. Okay, Otwan. Okay, these chin up pictures are a little hard to decipher. Okay, anything else, Chaitanya Chandra?
That's all, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Okay, thank you for all I'm glad that I had the opportunity to both be introduced to devotees and also accept other devotees, be empowered disciples. Although it sounds strange, my saying someone should be my disciple. Vaishnavas don't like to be in that position, but we do it for Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So be empowered Vaishnavas, and then everything is understood. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Hey.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Special thanks to the devotees.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Maharaj, Guru Maharaj,
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Guru Maharaj is already gone. So, thank you all the translators and for translating. Thanks everybody for coming. Just a reminder, the devotees that are introduced, you've only introduced your intent. That means you've just indicated to Guru Maharaj that in the future you would like to become an aspiring disciple. So if you're introduced, you don't have the right to chant the pranam mantra. So you just, after 6 months at the next meeting, you can be introduced if you send a letter and your authority or counselor sends a letter to me. And those devotees that have been accepted, that you are now officially aspiring disciples, later today or tomorrow morning, I will send you the Guru Maharaj's pranam mantra in audio and written form, so you can chant Guru Maharaj's pranam mantra. And the next step, minimum 6 months from that, from today, if you have a recommendation from your temple president, then you can be accepted to receive initiation. So I think that's clear. Thanks everybody for coming, and Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Vaishnava.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
Krishna.